I've always chased the rush that comes from doing what you're not supposed to. The places I went weren't abandoned. They were alive, humming with electricity and secrets. But most people didn't dare step inside after dark. That's what drew me thrill. The thrill of slipping past locks, the fear and excitement of being somewhere forbidden, where one wrong move could get me caught, or worse. It was on the far edge of town, a massive structure of corrugated steel and glass, the kind of building that looked normal in daylight but transformed under the cloak of night. Lights glimmered from inside, like the building was breathing. I parked behind a row of dumpsters and slipped through a side gate that hadn't been properly latched. Immediately, the smell of oil and metal hit me. The faint hum of electricity reverberated through the air, low and insistent. The warehouse stretched farther than I expected. My flashlight revealed towering shelves and massive machinery, stacked crates and conveyor belts twisting through the shadows. Some of the equipment looked functional, while other areas were coated in years of dust. The air was heavy, thick with heat, and the lingering scent of chemicals long since lost their labels. Every step I took echoed unnaturally, ricocheting off the walls, filling the cavernous interior with the sound of my own presence. I moved toward the central production floor, a maze of metal walkways and equipment that seemed impossibly dense. Offices lined one side, their windows broken or dusty. Papers lay scattered across the floors, some curled and brittle, others damp from a leak in the ceiling. The place was quiet, and yet I could feel it. The building was watching, assessing. I found a stairwell that led to the basement, a place that looked as though it hadn't been touched in years. The air grew colder as I descended, and the hum from above became distorted, echoing off the concrete walls and vibrating inside my skull. I told myself this was just the thrill, the adrenaline, but something was wrong. The basement corridor stretched before me, endless, with storage rooms and filing cabinets lining the walls. Shadows pooled in the corners, unnatural and deep, stretching far longer than they should have. I walked carefully, but my steps felt heavier than they should have, as though the floor itself resisted me. Every now and then, the light from my flashlight would catch something moving in the shadows. Not a person, but something shifting, inhumanly, lingering just beyond the beam. And still I moved forward, drawn by the need to see, to understand what wasn't meant to be seen. The corridor narrowed into a small chamber, cluttered with machinery and storage crates. At first I thought I was alone, but then I sensed its presence. Something was there, just beyond the edge of perception. I couldn't make out a shape, but I felt it, a cold awareness pressing in, moving just out of reach, watching. The air around me thickened, and the darkness deepened unnaturally. The shadows seemed to lean closer, stretching toward me like liquid. Panic prickled at the edges of my mind, but curiosity, or stubbornness, kept me rooted. The farther I went, the more the basement seemed to change. Corridors twisted where they shouldn't. A room I thought I had passed appeared again, and another doorway opened where there had been none before. The warehouse was reshaping itself around me. The air smelled sharper now, and a heat rolled off the machinery that should have been cold. I stumbled into a room where the machinery was older, more decayed. The shadows here moved differently, almost fluid, pooling across the floor and walls. I realized the presence was closer, but I still couldn't see it. My mind raced with possibilities, and every rational thought screamed at me to turn back. I tried to retrace my steps, but the layout had changed. Hallways twisted into impossible angles, ceilings lowered, doors led to rooms I had no memory of passing. I could feel the presence moving through the space with me, brushing at the edges of perception, pressing against me without touching. I realized something I had always feared. I wasn't alone, and I had no idea what was following me. Finally, I found the stairwell I had come down. I scrambled up the steps, and when I emerged onto the main floor, the warehouse had returned to its earlier guise. The machinery sat silent. Crates were stacked neatly. The air smelled ordinary again. Industrial, but benign. I ran for the exit, bursting out into the cold night. The warehouse loomed behind me, ordinary once more, as if nothing had happened. But I know better. I can still feel it sometimes. In quiet moments, the awareness that follows me. The way shadows linger just a little too long. The sudden chill in an empty room. The knowledge that some buildings are alive at night, and they remember. And if you ever wander into a place like that, be careful. They are always watching. And sometimes, they're hungry. I've always been drawn to places most people avoid at night. Not because they're abandoned, but because they're alive in ways you're not meant to see. My first real trespass was at an office building on the edge of town. It was a nondescript corporate block, usually empty at night, but every so often cleaning crews or security guards would be inside. I was 17 and reckless. Curiosity had me prowling through places that seemed ordinary, but felt off when the lights went out. I slipped through a side door, left ajar, and the smell hit me immediately. Polished floors under a thin layer of industrial cleaner, mixed with the faint coppery scent of old wiring and metal. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing rows of cubicles and scattered papers that looked like they hadn't moved in hours. The hum of fluorescent lights overhead made my skin crawl. The sound was too steady, too alive, like the building itself was watching me. I moved carefully down the main hallway, noting the flickering security cameras in the corners. I wasn't stupid. I didn't want to get caught, but I wanted to see what shouldn't be seen. I had explored empty factories before, but there was something different here. This place breathed in its own quiet way, and shadows clung to the corners like black smoke. I found a stairwell leading to the basement. Normally, I'd avoid basements, they're predictable. But tonight, curiosity overruled caution. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete and something I couldn't name. It was faint, almost floral-like perfume left to rot. I descended slowly, counting steps in my head to keep my nerves in check. Halfway down, I heard a low tapping. I froze. Nothing should be down here. It was coming from deeper in the basement. My heart jumped, but I forced myself to move forward. The basement opened into a corridor lined with filing cabinets and storage rooms. My flashlight flickered and I caught glimpses of movement, shadows that shouldn't have been there. I froze again, straining my ears. A whisper came from the far end of the hall, soft, unintelligible, but there was a command hidden in the cadence. Stay. The instinct to run warred with the need to see. I edged toward the source, my flashlight illuminating metal shelving and boxes stacked haphazardly. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the concrete walls, blending with the steady clicks that had started above them. I realized the clicks weren't random, they were counting me down. Each step, each flicker of my light seemed measured. I turned a corner and saw it. A door I hadn't noticed before, slightly ajar, and beyond it, a room lit by a single swinging fluorescent bulb. Inside, figures moved in ways that didn't make sense, limbs twitching unnaturally, heads jerking to meet me, eyes wide and unblinking. They weren't human, but they weren't entirely not human either. They paused, and the rhythm of the clicks synced with my heartbeat, every thump a cruel reminder that I didn't belong here. Panic finally overtook curiosity. I bolted back the way I came, tripping over boxes, scraping my hands on concrete walls. The whispers followed, rising into a high, grating chorus that seemed to seep through the floor, the walls, the ceiling. I stumbled onto the stairwell and ran for the door I'd entered. Outside, the night air was thin and sharp, but it didn't feel safe. The building loomed behind me, ordinary again, quiet again, as if nothing had moved inside at all. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, panting, hands shaking, my flashlight clutched like a talisman. I haven't returned to that building, or any other like it. I still wander at night sometimes, but now I stick to places I know are empty, where the only threat is falling through rotten wood or getting lost in shadows. Because I've learned something about buildings that are alive at night. Some of them aren't just empty, they're waiting for someone reckless enough to see what moves in the corners. And if they catch your attention, they won't let you leave. I've never been the kind of person to thrive in crowds. Even as a kid, I was more comfortable alone, losing myself in video games or wandering through back roads no one else cared to explore. By the time I reached high school, my private obsession had shifted from screens to real-world places. Abandoned places, the ones forgotten by everyone else. Old barns, derelict schools, crumbling hospitals. I wanted to see them all. By the time I got my license, I was unstoppable. Google Earth became my map to ruin. I'd spend nights scrolling over desolate areas, circling structures that looked ready to collapse, then mark them down. On weekends, I'd hit 3 or 4 of them in a single day. For me, the thrill wasn't in going with friends. I only tried that twice and they were too loud, too nervous. No, the real rush came from being alone, with only a flashlight and my nerves. One autumn afternoon, I found something that wasn't on any urban explorer, blog, or forum. It was a narrow dirt road outside a dying town called Grayfield, a place people usually just drove past. I parked where the pavement ended, grabbed my backpack, and walked deeper into the woods. The air smelled of damp earth, and the silence pressed against my ears until even the crunch of leaves underfoot felt too loud. It took 10 minutes before I saw it. A church, rotting in the center of a clearing. Its steeple had collapsed decades ago, and the roof sagged like wet paper. In front of it sat an old stone well, ivy creeping down its sides like veins. I shouldn't have gone near it, but of course I did. When I leaned over expecting water, I saw only blackness. My stomach flipped when I realized I couldn't see the bottom. Then came the sound. Click! A pause, then another click, echoing up from the dark. It wasn't water. It was too intentional, too rhythmic. I don't know how long I stood there hypnotized before I pulled myself away and approached the church. Its doors were hanging open, the wood swollen with rot. I stepped inside, and the floor moaned beneath me like something alive. Dust swirled in the shafts of light, filtering through shattered stained glass windows, coloring the ruins in bloody reds and sickly greens. The pews were overturned, splintered like broken bones. Behind the pulpit was a narrow hallway. I followed it, passing doors that had either been torn off their hinges or were clawed with deep gouges. At the end was a staircase leading down. The door was open, and the air leaking from below was damp and stale, like the breath of something that hadn't surfaced in years. Normally, this is where I'd grin and press forward, but this time, a cold unease settled into me. I hesitated at the top, flashlight trembling in my hand. Then, against my better judgment, I descended. 7 steps down the wood gave way. My leg plunged through, snapping the beam with a crack so loud it echoed through the basement. I fell, crashing into dirt and rubble, my flashlight skittering out of reach. That's when I heard it. Hello. A voice, thin, warbling, like a child imitating an adult. The rest of the words were nonsense, slurred and broken, but I caught that one word clear as day. My skin prickled as I scrambled for the flashlight. The beam landed on stone walls and broken furniture, and a tunnel. The voice came from inside. I crept closer, unable to stop myself. The tunnel had been dug by hand, the walls raw and uneven, gouged with shovel marks. My light flickered, and in the split second of darkness, I heard the voice again, closer now. Then, silence. Click. 2 seconds. Another click. My pulse hammered so hard I thought it would burst. The sound grew louder, echoing from inside the tunnel, joined by whispers that didn't sound like one person anymore. I turned and bolted. The stairs were half ruined, but I dragged myself up with both hands, scraping my palms raw. I didn't dare look back. I didn't want to see what was following. My flashlight dropped somewhere on the stairs, but I left it. I just ran. Through the ruined hall, through the nave, out into the clearing. I stopped, only once, at the well. The woods were silent, suffocatingly silent. No wind, no insects, not even a single bird. I forced myself to glance back into the pit. This time there were eyes, reflecting faintly in my own pale light, far below. They blinked. I ran until my lungs were on fire, branches tearing at my clothes. When I finally reached my car, I locked the doors and just sat there, trembling, too afraid to turn the key in the ignition. The woods around me were silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I never went back to Grayfield. I still explore sometimes, but I avoid churches, especially ones with wells, because every so often when I'm lying awake at night, I hear it again. Click, click, echoing in the dark like it's waiting for me to answer.